in Tennessee, and our computer science department is one of schools in top 100 ranking. And we are expecting right now, we have around, including graduate students, we have around 600 students in computer science, and that number is expected to reach 700 computer science students this fall. So we
That's
are
great.
glad that you were able to join us, and we are very excited to listen to you and your experiences.
Thank you. No, I'm extremely excited. It's interesting as I've only done this full presentation. Well, I've never done this full presentation, but I've only really given my story a couple of times. And that's been in the last year, but it's been clear. And when this opportunity came up, I realized there are components of my life that are inspiring but there are also moments of my life that other people have experienced. And through choices and through, the things that just self-doubt and those types of things, they haven't come out of them. So I really started recognizing I want to share my story more, hopefully helping people to understand that, you're not defined by your past. Your past makes you up, but you aren't defined by it. And to you can use it as a motivator. You can use it as but you should never use it as a hindrance, because we all have an opportunity to make better choices and try and overcome the situations that we found ourselves in. So.
Thank you, Laurie. So I guess we'll start now. So it's my immense pleasure to introduce Larry Whiteside. And I really don't know how to best introduce him. As you listen to him, you will understand that Larry has wore so many hats throughout his life. First and foremost, he is a cybersecurity professional, but he's an advocate, an advisor, entrepreneur, a veteran who has served our Air Force. So I will let Larry speak about his story, and welcome, Larry, to our department. And we are excited to hear your experiences.
Thank you. Again, I really appreciate the opportunity to share, and hopefully, if even one person takes something away from this, then for me, it was beyond worth it. So I'll start with just a quick "Who am I?" Right. So, I've been in cybersecurity technically 29 years this year, and that's inclusive of a 2-year internship that I had coming out of college, where I thought I wanted to be a developer and write code, and quickly learned that, I did not like it nearly as much as I thought I did. But when I look back over the time that I've been in the field, I've been through a lot, both personally and professionally, and it's been a lot of fun. I've learned, right? I'm a true believer that you should never regret the past. You should look at everything you go through as an opportunity to learn. So you can, if it's an opportunity for you to learn to do better, then you do better the next time. If it's an opportunity for you to learn, something different, then change that the next time you come across it. But everything in your past should be an opportunity to learn. So I'm going to go through a lot. I'm a grandson of a Tuskegee Airman. He's the one who convinced me to go into the Air Force. I've been a CSO or CISO for companies. Well, I think my first role as a CISO was over 20 years ago. So I've been doing this stuff for a long time. I'm a board member and advisor for a number of different organizations in the tech space, and some not in the tech space. And then the thing that drives my passion is ICMCP. So I'm a co-founder and the current president of ICMCP. And if you don't and haven't heard of ICMCP, we are geared at increasing diversity in cybersecurity, right? At the end of the day, it's about ensuring that BIPOC, women, and LGBTQ plus have more opportunities to get into roles in the field, but also for those in the field, they have a mechanism and opportunity to level themselves up to be ultimately what they want to be, and hopefully that is some type of leadership role, because we need more diverse leaders in the field of cyber. So with that, as I think through my life and I started documenting and going through this, and I had never put a presentation together related to this previously. The 2 times I'd done this before was really me just talking. But as I sat and I started thinking about my life and going back over it, literally, I there were so many different facets of it. And when I look at the early years, right, and I think about what that was and how to define that, this is where I got. And it was, I really felt I lived a nice middle class lifestyle. If you think back to I grew up in the 70s and 80s. I think back to that time, right? There were 2 parents in the household. We had a son and a daughter, right? And my little sister. I asked God for my little sister. I told my mother that if she didn't have a girl, that she was going to have to take the baby back to the hospital. So I got the little sister that I wanted, and so I really had what I thought was great life. We moved from the suburbs, from an apartment to the suburbs. We had a nice little house. We were one of the first people in the neighborhood. I ended up getting a dog, right? And at that time, my dreams were big, right? We moved into the house when I was 5 years old, and I had big dreams. I played with Legos, and I used to build, and I won a science fair with a Lego project. It was great. Life was great. Everything flowed, everything worked, right? I went to school, I came home, both of my parents were there. I spent a lot of time with my dad at that time. My mom worked, and we did a lot of family things, and it was a lot of fun growing up back then. And then things transitioned. And as things transitioned is when I got close to middle school. And I began hanging around with different people, but also things started happening in my house. My dad went from being a regular blue collar working guy to a hustle guy, and he started to get involved in drugs and things of that nature, and that started directly impacting me. And I didn't realize that it was impacting me then. It wasn't until years later that I began to realize the correlation of these things that were impacting me. So as I went from being bullied and having, fighting people on a regular basis because people were bullying me, to becoming the bully. Because of everything that was going on at home, I was frustrated because of the things that I was dealing with. I started shoplifting. Come the 7th grade, I started flunking out. I literally had the most F's I've ever had in my entire life in my 7th grade year. And then to cap all of it off, my dog, who his name was Bigfoot, and I called him Bigfoot because his palms were bigger than my hand were. And so my dog got killed because there was a little boy in the neighborhood who had shot him with a pellet gun. And so one day, this kid is riding by on his bike, and for whatever reason at that time, my dog saw him, and PTSD or whatever it was. And my dog was always outside. My dog was always not on a leash, and that was sort of a thing back then. But for this one time, my dog chased this kid down and bit him. And so when he bit him, they took my dog away and they had to put my dog down. And so I had all these things going on that were happening that just seemed to be happening all at once. And so all the things that had gone on where, I had all these dreams and aspirations, all of the wide-eyed things that I thought about previously, basically all seemed to disappear. I got busted shoplifting multiple times. Probably the worst whooping that I never got was I was brazen about it. So I stole 2 big bags of chips, and then I went outside and with the bad crew of guys that I was hanging with, went outside and ate one of the bags of chips, and then went back in with that same bag of chips to get some more. And I happened to get caught, and the guys that were with me, of course, everybody scattered. And then as I'm I'm screaming, and that the police officer for the store is asking for, my parents' information. I'm saying, yeah, no, I don't have parents. I live by myself. One of the guys who was running, yelled, oh, his parents are at home. So they basically were telling me I was going to have to go to juvie and all this other stuff. So of course I spit out my home number. They ended up calling my mother, and my mom came up, and my mom was not very happy with me. But it was just, as I look back on it, it was one of those times and one of those moments that I was just in a dark place with everything going on with my dad, with our life really changing, because that middle class lifestyle that we had basically dissipated because our house was in turmoil between my parents. My mom was working a lot, and so I was a latchkey kid who was home a lot by himself and was really just doing things that I probably shouldn't be doing and getting into things that I shouldn't be getting into. And it's by the grace of God that I didn't end up in jail or worse because of all the things that I was doing. And so I'll never forget, though, that day when I did get caught, and my mom took me home, and she didn't say a word to me the entire time on the way home. And then I get home, and the way my room was positioned, there was a mirror in the hallway, so I could see all the way into the kitchen. Because my mother basically, when we got home, said, just go to your room. And so when I went to my room and I could see her in the kitchen cooking, I picked up my Bible comic book, and for 4 hours while she was in the kitchen cooking, I sat specifically in a perfect position where I was in the mirror so that she can see me while I was sitting on my bed, and I had the Bible comic book. Now, did I read it? No. Right, I wasn't reading it, but it was to show my mom, look, I know better. I'm in the Bible comic book that you got me, Mom. But it was one of those points in my life that I had to come to a realization of what was going on and what I was doing. It just so happened that God was going to make some more changes that were going to help me. So what ends up happening is my grandmother passes. Now, this is the grandmother who I was closest to. This is my mom's mom. She was the one who at Christmas every year my sister and I would go stay with. And anything we wanted, she got. She made sure that we did not, when we came to her place, we were spoiled. She treated us like a grandmother should. But when she passed, right, I was devastated. I was horribly upset. But then what happened was her passing was an opportunity for my mother, because my mother also recognized what was going on in my life and in our life as a whole as a family, and said, we're going to move to San Antonio. So at the time we had lived in Houston, and she said, we're going to move to San Antonio. So we moved into my grandmother's old house. And my mom, obviously God was working through her, saw it as an opportunity to change the dynamic of what was going on, both for the betterment of me and hopefully for the betterment of her and my father. And so when we moved to San Antonio, I reinvented myself. Rather than hanging with, a bad crowd, when I went to this school, I realized that, it was cool that people thought I was cool when I was smart. Because what happened was they happened to be behind curriculum wise. And so the things that they were teaching is stuff that I had already gone through in my previous school. So because it was easy, and when I would get an A+, all the girls liked it, and they all thought I was so smart. So I reinvented myself. I was like, okay, being smart is cool. Being smart is okay. It's all right to be smart. And so that's what happened. And so when I reinvented myself, I sort of saw a new opportunity. I saw an opportunity for me to be something more. I got re-energized in, okay, right, what do I want to do? What do I want to be when I grow up? And I got back into, thinking about engineering and that type of thing. And then I found sports. And so, when I found sports, when we moved there, I was forced to play basketball. And I stress, I was forced to play basketball. I had never played basketball before. But the summer after my dog had got killed just right before we moved up to San Antonio, my mother had shipped me off to Los Angeles. And when she shipped me off to Los Angeles during the '84 Summer Olympics, my family out there was heavy into basketball, and they introduced me to basketball. I started to like it. So when I moved to San Antonio, all my family that was in San Antonio basically forced me to play basketball. So that became a thing. And so then it became about basketball. And that was now I'm an athlete and a smart athlete. But then, like everything, things change. So I go through middle school. I'm getting really good grades. I go through freshman year of high school. The summer between the summer between 8th grade and 9th grade. I graduated 8th grade in May. I'm 5'7", wearing a size 10.5 shoe. I start freshman year of high school that August, and I'm 6'1" in a size 13 shoe. And so the coaches had no idea who I was, even though they had come to my school and seen me. And basketball became my thing. Well, of course, as I think I'm starting to get my life together, and I'm thinking things that are going to, take a turn for the better, and I'm out of the woods from where I was when I was shoplifting and everything else. The house catches on fire. And the house catches on fire because my father, who he had put a gas generator in the basement. Well, there was also a water heater in the basement, and the water heater has a pilot light. So when you go to put gas in a generator, in a gas-driven generator, and the fumes catch the pilot light, the back of the house explodes. So when the back of the house explodes, he, of course, gets caught in it. And luckily, there was about an inch of water on the floor in the basement. So he was able to get the fire out of him, get the fire off of him. But now he's stuck in the basement with these bars. And so he's yelling for me to bring him a water hose and stick it through that so he can try and keep himself cool while the back of the house is on fire. And then by the grace of God, somehow he's able to bend, right, with my help a little bit. And I stress a little bit because I'm 14 or 15 years old, so my ability to bend bars is not really a thing. But it's through the grace of God that he is able to get out through the bars and get out to the front. So by this time, fire trucks are pulling up and everything, and he's sitting probably 15 feet away from me to the right, and his skin is literally falling off his body, right? And so as his skin is falling off his body, and I'm sitting there and I'm crying, and I'm watching our house burn up, and all I can think of is like, I don't know what just happened, and I don't know like what's going to happen tomorrow. Like I don't know how to deal with this at 15. So my dad goes into the hospital, and we thought was going to be a turning point for his life, because up until this point, if you recall me talking about my mom wanting us to move to San Antonio to create a new situation for the family, you recall me before that saying how my dad lost his job and things just started, going downhill. Well, what my dad turned to was drugs. And so when we moved to San Antonio, the hope was that it would get him out of the drugs that he was dealing with in Houston. Well, when he came to San Antonio, drugs became a thing there as well. And so when he went into the hospital from the fire, it seemed as if this was a turning point for our family, because my mother, who had been holding it down, working every day, but ensuring that she came home and did Bible study with my sister and I, ensuring that she took my sister and I to church on a regular basis, ensuring that she gave my sister and I the affirmation that not only does God love us and we're a child of God, but also that we can accomplish anything. So when this fire happened and I sort of felt like I was losing my way, who again came through was my mom, right? Being the rock. Listen, this is just a point in time. It's not that big a deal. We'll get through it. And so we did. We ended up moving into a rental home not far from where we were living at the time. So I didn't have to move far from my friends. I didn't have to change schools. I didn't have to, my life didn't really change other than the fact that, I didn't have many clothes. And my dad sort of reached an epiphany moment and said, I'm going to start doing better. I'm going to come to church with you and your mom, and I'm going to start getting my life together. And so in this moment, I thought, okay, things are aligning themselves. We're getting back to a point, right, of being a family. We're getting back to a point of normalcy. Well, that lasted for 2 months. And so after 2 months, I shouldn't even say it lasted 2 months. I should say it lasted for a very short period, because 2 months later, my mom, my buddy Clarence was over at my house and said, my mother said, you need to walk Clarence home. I was like, okay. She's like, no, you need to walk him home now. I said, okay. So I walked him home, hurry up, and came back. I'm like, Mommy, what's the rush? She's like, pack your stuff, the movers are coming. And she basically sat myself and my sister down and said, listen, leaving your dad, I can't take this anymore. I can't tell you everything, she says, because you won't understand, but we just need to go, and this is what's best for you guys. So she ended up moving us to the complete opposite side of town. And so for those who have been to San Antonio, San Antonio is not a small town. And so I lived on the east side, I moved to the north side. And so with that, I didn't want to change schools. I'm like, all my friends are at this high school. I went to middle school with all of them. Like, I don't want to change schools. So in order to get to school, I was catching the public city bus at 5:15 a.m. so I could get to school by 7:45. And I caught it every day, Monday through Friday, every morning, to the point that if I was a couple of minutes late, the bus driver would sit at the stop and wait for me. Because if I didn't catch that bus, the next bus, I would be late for school. So I did that for a few months. And then I just, I got tired, but B, I started acting out again. So if you remember before, when I was acting out, I started shoplifting, right? I started bullying people. Well, this time I started fighting, right? And I started fighting at school, and it just wasn't, it wasn't sustainable. I was not happy. I wasn't getting much sleep. I was still playing basketball, and basketball was my refuge, but I couldn't maintain what I was doing. And I missed my father. And so I ended up switching schools. Oh, I didn't even change the slide. So during this, and so one of the pieces that came up from him being in the hospital was my mom found out that my dad was HIV positive. And so that was the thing that she ended up, I didn't end up finding that out until I was in my 20s, that was part of the reason that she said, hey, I've got to leave your dad. Another thing that I forgot, had I changed the slide, I would have remembered it, was that when we were in that rental house, at Christmas, our first Christmas in that rental house, our house was broken into. And when the house got broken into, they literally stole all of our Christmas toys. They stole everything in the house except my dad's very expensive stereo system, which to me at the time, at 15, it didn't really click, but to my mother, it clicked. My mother knew right away. My mother knew that, that was drug related, and that had to do with him either setting it up or something, but he was definitely involved, because the only thing that he took pride in was his Marantz stereo system. And so for that to be the only thing that didn't happen, that didn't get stolen during that break-in, my mother had enough. And so this is when we ended up moving and moving to the other side of town. And it was tough because, to that point, my sister and I both idolized our dad. Though he wasn't the best person, though he had his struggles, we still loved him because he was dad. But when I ended up saying that I was going to switch schools, I did it again. If you remember me saying earlier, when we moved from Houston to San Antonio, I found a way to reinvent myself. Well, it happened again. When I went to this new school, I was introduced to this thing called a computer. I'd never seen a computer before, right? And this is the junior year of high school, 1988. I'd never to that point seen a computer. And so seeing this computer and getting into this class, they were writing code in a program called Pascal. And so many of you that are old like me will say, Pascal, oh my gosh, like we're dating ourselves. Pascal was long defunct. But Pascal was, for me, the breakthrough into technology. Seeing these computers, seeing Pascal, seeing that I could write, utilize Pascal to write code and create little games. I was like just obsessed, and it became my secondary passion to basketball. And so at that new school, as I'm writing, learning to write code, I'm learning about computers, I'm playing basketball. I get some college scholarship offers, and I end up going to school. And when I go to school, one of the promises that I made my mother, because I was the first one to go to college. So my dad had an opportunity to go to college and screwed off a football scholarship. And so my mother, she went to RN to nursing school, but she didn't go to college. And so going to college, my promise to my mother was, I will graduate in 4 years. Regardless, whatever happened, I'm going to graduate in 4 years, Mommy, I promise you. Well, when I went to college, what a lot of people don't tell you is, especially early days and especially as an athlete, is in order to graduate in 4 years, there's a certain number of credits that you need to have. And you need to start doing that your freshman year. And if you don't do that your freshman year and you still really plan to graduate in 4 years, you're either going to be taking things during the summer or you're going to be doubling up. And so my senior year, I took 23 and 22 hours respectively in 2 semesters back to back. But it was because I promised my mother I was going to graduate in 4 years. But what happened was I had no idea what to do next. I had no idea, like, what comes after college. Like, okay, like that was as far as my brain had really thought. Is okay. Everybody says after you graduate high school, you go to college. Well, and then what? What happens next? What are jobs just going to come to me and fall in my lap? So I was lucky enough to get an internship, and this internship was to a company that was contracting out to Motorola. And when they were contracting out to Motorola, I was part of a project to write. It was 500 million lines of COBOL code. And after doing that for a short period of time, I realized I hated writing code, because what I thought writing code was, and what you do in high school and college, right, versus what writing code is in corporate America, was 2 totally different things in the early 90s. And so I realized that was not something I wanted to do. Then they asked me to break code. Breaking code became fun. So during my internship, I got to learn how to break code and how to compile modules and then try and break it and make it do things that it wasn't supposed to do. And it put me in a different mindset, which I think I've been able to leverage through until today. But it was still then what, right? Like, does that internship turn into a job? I don't know how this works. And there was nobody there to coach me or guide me. My mom didn't know. There was nobody really giving me the guidance on what the things were to do next. Wow, it's raining. So then I graduate. And so when I graduate, once again, I think everything is great. I think things are moving on this certain path. Okay, I'm graduating. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. I'm thinking I'm going to join the military. I'm just weighing options and trying to figure out what I want to do. And my dad gets murdered. And so his murder set me back again. It pushed me back into the realm of what do I do? Because in this particular instance, the hard thing about his murder was I know who did it. So it was, and I knew who did it was because it was people that I grew up with. And so, and they were, it's a gang that was in my neighborhood. And what happened was a couple of guys from the gang robbed him. He then went and beat them up and got back what they robbed from him. They then all jumped him and beat him to death with a hammer in his head. And so I went and saw him at the hospital. When I saw him at the hospital, because he didn't die directly from the event, he ended up dying from a brain aneurysm as a result of it. But when I saw him in the hospital, and I'll never forget it, I was wearing a black Raiders jacket. Here I am, I'm a college graduate, thinking I have my whole life ahead of me, and this happens, and I'm right back to, what am I doing now? What am I going to do? I hear on the streets who did it. I know who, like, do I go get revenge? Do I go and act revenge because, like, now I'm saddened, I'm hurt, I'm confused, I'm frustrated, I'm angry? Do I go out and derail everything that I've worked for to this point? Do I go and make the decision to, just because of the emotion that I'm in the moment, to go out and make a right turn? Or do I look at this crossroads and say, okay, making that right turn is not going to help me. Making that right turn is not going to bring him back. As angry as I was, as sad as I was, as much as I cried about it, I had a choice to make. And so I chose to pray about it. I chose to let it go. And recognize that as much as I love my dad, a lot of the consequences associated with his life were ones that he built himself. And so I made a different decision. Went to the Air Force. And so when I went into the Air Force, I got my commission to go into the Air Force. And it was at the behest of my grandfather. He was pushing me very, very hard. He said, Larry, go. He said, Larry, go get your commission. You got your degree, get your commission, and join the Air Force. And I said, Grandpa, I don't want to be a pilot. And his exact words to me is, he says, baby Larry, because that's what they call me, because I was Larry Jr., even though I was taller than him and my dad. He says, baby Larry, that technology thing is going to die, but pilots are forever. They're always going to need pilots. And I laugh about it to this day, because we still need pilots. But, if he were alive, I'd be able to talk to him about, well, it doesn't look like this technology thing is going to end anytime soon, Grandpa. But from his perspective, being a pilot, he thought and he felt in his heart of hearts that pilots are forever, and you're always going to need pilots. And so I got my commission, and it was a blessing, because, again, that was another point in my life in which I think back on it, and had I made some of the wrong decisions, had I done some things differently than I did, I wouldn't be here, right? I literally, because I'd have taken myself down a different path. So I ended up serving 8.5 years in the Air Force before I resigned my commission, and then I jumped into the private sector. But in the Air Force, and I recommend military service for people who are looking for direction. I recommend, if you've got a degree and you're looking for direction on what to do, where to go, the military service can offer a lot. The leadership that I learned being in the military is unparalleled to anything. I don't think there's a leadership course that you can take that will equate to what you can get from being a leader in the military. And so I did that. I was very blessed to be able to do it, and be able to come out of the military being a better person. And I largely owe the military to a lot of who I am from a character standpoint to this day, besides my mom, of course. So then, right now it's private sector, right? And I titled this one The Hurdles, because when you think about this, a lot of times we come to hurdles and we don't know what to do, how to do, and life is about hurdles. I've talked about a number of them during my growing up, right? But then they didn't stop. right? When I got into the field of cybersecurity, when I got into the private sector, right? I've quit jobs. I had a boss who literally was berating me and telling me how bad I was, and I didn't understand. I just it was weird. Now, what I did recognize was that it was a bit of a power shift or a power struggle between he and I, and that's what led to a lot of the his sort of rating me the way he was, because he was trying to innate his or push his power on me, and I had to quit. I walked into his office and quit. I had no job. I had no setup. I had nothing. I was already a father of three, and I didn't have a plan, but I quit, right? And it was a hurdle, and I went to work at Best Buy, right, while I was trying to figure out the things so that I can continue to support, because my wife at the time was a stay-at-home mom. So I went to Best Buy and got a job. I was working there, 6 days a week. I was also working another job, right? And so while I was trying to figure out what this next step was going to be, right? I've been fired, right? CISOs get fired. It's a thing. You've probably read about it multiple times, right? And in my time since leaving the military, I've had 15 jobs, right? And I say this to say, you're going to face hurdles. There are going to be so many different things and so many different hurdles that come in front of you over your lifetime and over your working career. Because if you think about it, your working career, right, from your early 20s through to whenever you stop working, is the largest part of your life. And so you're going to have so many hurdles that happen during that time that you can't let any one hurdle be that thing that trips you up. You got to find your way, right? Figure out what your plan is and jump over it. Hurdles are meant to test you, right? But it's up to you on whether you let it break you, right? When I moved to Florida, my wife at the time of 23 years asked for a divorce. I was not prepared for that. I was not planning it. We had 5 children. It was because of what I went through with the divorce with my parents and how it impacted me. I did not want my children to ever have to deal with that. But it was a hurdle that got put in front of me. It was something that I had to deal with. I had to change who I was. I had to change how I parented. I had to change a lot of things in order to sort of reach the goals of what I wanted to do with my children. But I didn't let it break me. And every hurdle, no matter what that hurdle is, it's an opportunity for you to figure out, right? To figure out a better you. It's an opportunity for you to figure out, all right, yes, this is a hurdle right now. This is an obstacle in front of me, but I can run under the hurdle. I can run around the hurdle. I can jump over the hurdle, right? But you can get around the hurdle. I've had so many hurdles that as I look back, I don't want to count them, but as I look back and I look at the hurdles that I've been able to overcome just through faith and perseverance, right? I know what it is I want to do. I know who it is that I want to be. And so there's no obstacle that can get thrown in my way that's going to take me off of that course. And so I say all this to say, I recognize I am blessed beyond measure. I talk to my mother at least once a week and remind her how much impact she's had on my life, and just constantly giving me the affirmation that I can be something, that I can overcome my obstacles. But there are some phrases that I've learned and taken to heart over the years. Don't let your yesterday ruin your tomorrow, right? Our past is the thing that shapes us and it creates us, and that's what makes us diverse, right? We talk about diversity a lot, right? And we all recognize that diversity is not just about skin color and ethnicity. It's about all of those things that shape you as you go through life. It's about the hurdles that you jump over. All of those things are the things that create and make each one of us unique. That's how each of us has a different lens where we can all look at the exact same thing, but because of the things that have shaped us, we can see the same thing differently because our perspectives are all unique, right? So don't let your past define you. If I allowed my past to define me, right, I would look like a lot of the guys that I grew up with when I lived in Houston. A lot of them have, the majority of the ones that I was close with that were in the close-knit crew that I ran with, all of them, if they are alive, have been in jail for multiple years. Many of them are dead. And they allowed the hurdles to trip them. They allowed the hurdles to be blockers for what they could accomplish. So don't allow those hurdles, right, to do that. And don't be your own obstacle, because what happens is we have the ability, our brain is processing 11,000 things per second. And so because of that, we've got both these unconscious biases that happen, and we've got these conscious-based things that happen based on our past of decisions that we make. Don't be your own obstacle. Don't let your past, don't let your yesterday ruin your tomorrow, right? Don't let your past define you, right? Allow yourself some grace, right? And I use that word a lot. If anybody who's ever spoken with me on a regular basis, you probably heard me in the last 2 years really inject that into a lot of the phrases that I use, because grace is important. You have to recognize none of us are ever going to be perfect. Never, right? It's a goal. Perfection is a goal, but none of us are ever going to be perfect. It's about when you come to these obstacles, when you come to these hurdles, making the right choices that are going to help you overcome them and move forward so that you can use it as a learning opportunity so that same hurdle doesn't get put in front of you again. That's all I had. I will open it up for any questions. Here's my contact info. If anybody ever wants to reach out, these are the best ways to reach me. But that's all I had. And again, I appreciate you guys for having me. I hope somebody took something away from this. My goal today was to just really share a lot of the things that I've gone through personally that I've still been able to overcome. And been able to overcome. And honestly, my children will never experience a lot of the things that I experienced, because me overcoming a lot of those hurdles has allowed me to learn how to be better for them.
So, Larry, thank you so much. It's so inspiring. You know, usually I do my own work when people speak sometimes because I always have so much to do, but I couldn't do anything else because I was glued to your talk. So I do have a question for you, and I'm asking the audience to ask you questions, and I'm sure they all have. I mean, I hope some folks will have some good questions for you. My question is, you know, you have done so many things. You are a cybersecurity professional, entrepreneur, founder, advisor, consultant, mentor, community collaborator. Among all the things that you have done, what you consider your biggest achievement?
Honestly, so for me, my biggest achievement professionally is ICMCP. ICMCP is by far, it is the thing that I hope becomes part of my legacy, right? When people, you know, I was on a podcast yesterday and they said, you know, if you died tomorrow, what would you want people to think of you? And for me, that achievement of ICMCP and ICMCP making a difference in this industry is the thing that I'm most proud of. And there's still a lot to grow, right? And for ICMCP, there's a lot that still needs to happen. There's a lot of changing that's going to happen in the org, and a lot of growth that's going to go through. But just the foundation of it, what we've been able to do to this point, and what I envision that we're going to be able to do in the, you know, as we continue to grow, is really, for me, the biggest thing professionally that I could have ever hoped to have done. Like there's no role, there's no project, there's nothing that I could have done that's been better than that. Personally, it's my children. I am I'm a very, very, very involved and active dad. I don't miss an event, a play, a basketball game, right? So I've got 5, 21, 21, 18, 8, and 7. And all 3 of my older ones, my younger ones haven't really started getting active, very active yet. They're about to start this summer. But all of my older ones, I've never missed a basketball game. All of the travel basketball and football game, I was there. I coached, pretty much all of their teams until they got into high school. And then even through high school, any travel teams that they participated in, I was a coach. So that's my biggest accomplishment personally, is my children. And I'm very blessed because my 2 oldest kids are graduating in May. They had a full academic scholarship. And then my 18-year-old son leaves for college this summer, and he's going to play football at the Naval Academy. So I am very, very blessed as it relates to them.
Thank you, Larry. So students, anyone in the audience who have any, oh, we have a question from William. Out of all of your jobs in last 24 years, which one did you find most interesting and why?
Yeah, so that's actually a good question. For me, that was working for an energy and utility company. So I worked in financial services, I worked in healthcare, but working for a utility and energy company was enlightening because it showed the volatility of our power grids, right? Literally, when I started working for that company, and so what it did was we did energy generation and and power transmission. So we had transmission lines all across the state of Texas, and we had dams and we had power plants, right? Both coal and natural gas. And so as I worked there and began to implement a security program and build things out and understand the workings and interworkings of power plants and how the grid worked, I recognized how volatile things are in the power grid. And it literally changed my life as it relates to what I think when I flip my power switch on at home. So like turning on the power switch at home never meant anything to me until I took that role. And now every time I turn on a light or the power comes on in my house, I understand all of the working parts behind it and how volatile that is and how one small little thing could negatively impact an entire neighborhood or a state, if you think about when Texas had their issue.
So another question from Cameron. What was the podcast you were in yesterday, the one that you just mentioned?
Yeah, the podcast I was on yesterday, I'll tell you right now, and they would kill me because I didn't know it off the top of my head, but it was the Privacy Please podcast.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Larry. I actually, first off, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story. You've experienced so much from such a young age and continuously so throughout your whole life. I want to ask, what kept you going? What inspired you to embrace the challenges and keep moving forward?
Yeah, so a large part of that is faith, right? So I'm a Christian, and I have a real faith that God's got a plan for me, right? I don't always necessarily see it, but I recognize that my obstacles and the things that are put in front of me is not my final destination. So I keep pushing for that reason. Number 2 is for me, because of my mother. My mother is a huge inspiration for me because despite she hasn't achieved a ton of things, right? She doesn't make a lot of money or anything like that, but I want to make her proud because she sacrificed. She did everything within her power to continuously tell a sister and I that we could be anything. Despite everything around us, our neighborhood that we lived in, the people around us, right? None of it supported the things that she said, right? None of it said, oh yeah, look around, you could be anything. No, that wasn't what we saw. But her constant affirmation to my sister and I caused both my sister and I to be really about pushing and striving to be better, because I want to make my mom proud. I want my mom to be able to brag about the things that I have done and accomplished, because it's her constant affirmation and constant support of us. And she didn't, she wasn't one, she didn't come to my basketball games. She didn't, but I didn't look at that as a thing, because I knew she was working. She was a single mom. When we moved when the house that burnt down. So to give some context to this, the house that burnt down in San Antonio was a 3-story home with 14-foot ceilings. Like it was a humongous house that we moved into. That was my grandmother's. We then moved into a 3-bedroom rental. When my mom left my dad because she didn't make much money, right? We moved into a 1-bedroom apartment, and I slept on the couch for a couple of years. And so I recognize that the sacrifices that my mom made were so that my sister and I had better opportunities. I ended up, again, had she not chosen to divorce my dad, I probably wouldn't be here, because I'm not sure I would have been introduced to computers in the way that I was and had the curiosity that I had. So that's what's really kept me striving and kept me pushing.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Any other questions from our audience?
I have a question. Larry, thank you so much for coming and talk to us. And your story is just so inspiring. And thank you for sharing your personal details. I think that sometimes that's difficult to do. But I think it's part of your story, and it makes it so much more real. But my question is, you mentioned that when you graduated college that you didn't know what your next step should be, and you didn't really have a mentor at that time to guide you through that. So I was wondering if you could kind of share some advice to our students who may be graduating coming soon, and what they should do to get over that hurdle. Who should they reach out to?
Yeah, no, so that's a really good question. So there are a couple of things there. So number one, you said a very important word, a mentor. Everybody should have mentors. Some of us call them a personal board of directors. Even having been in this field as long as I have mentors, right, that I reach out to. But everybody should find a mentor, somebody that they can talk to, and you should have more than one, right? And they don't necessarily have to just be in the industry that you want to work in, right? So that's one. Two is find organizations, right? So such as WESIS, such as ICMCP, that can help you, that are going to potentially have job postings and things that employers are posting there. Today's environment is 70% who you know and 30% what you know. So the next thing is ensure you have a LinkedIn profile and engage. And when I say engage, it doesn't just mean go out and like posts. It means when you see posts about something that you think is compelling, comment on it and get into dialogues with other people, because then when you get into dialogues with other people, right, then those can become connections that you then leverage for roles that you are interested in, right? I can't tell you the last time that I applied to a job via a link that was on the web. That's how people get jobs today. Today is about 70% who you know and 30% what you know, because getting yourself in front of a hiring manager, right, is far easier. And I'll give you an example. So I've got a friend that I go to church with here, and he was looking for a new role. And he's not in cybersecurity. He's like an accountant or something. And so he saw a job at a local company here. I happened to be connected to the recruiter. So I said, hey, give me your resume. I'll send it out to her and see. I'm not sure if it's her role or not, but I'll send it out to her. So I sent it to her via LinkedIn. And I've never met her. She's here, right? She lives here in the Tampa area where I live, but I've never physically met her, but we connected on LinkedIn over some dialogue. And she then said, hey, good to hear from you. I'm not the recruiter for that role, but I'll get it over to the one who is. And so he got an interview within 2 weeks. Now, he didn't end up getting the job because they didn't feel he was qualified enough for it. But the fact that he was able to get an interview, right, within 2 weeks without having to go through the apply online, wait and see, do they call you back? Do they, or don't they call you back, right? So connect. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, build one. And start connecting. If you do have a LinkedIn profile, start connecting. It starts through dialogue, and then it starts through building relationships.
Any other questions from audience? So I have one while others are thinking. Maybe we have 5 minutes to close. But you know that in computing and cybersecurity, the representation of females and minorities are very, very low.
Mm-hmm.
So you being a role model yourself, what is your message to students who identify themselves as a underrepresented students in this field? Do you have any message for them?
Yeah, my message is, it's really about everything I talked about today, right? Recognize that you have value. You're going to have hurdles, right? Just because you are a minority in this field, you're going to have hurdles. You're going to have people who don't think that you can accomplish it. You're going to have people who are going to try and get in your way because they don't want you to accomplish it. Don't let your obstacles define your future, right? Because if you allow them to stop you, you're never going to achieve what's potentially possible in you. So recognize, and here's the deal. And for people, I like to use this term, put people in the box they belong. So when you identify those people who are obstacles for you, who are putting up hurdles for you, it's okay, right? You don't have to then turn negative towards them. Recognize who they are, put them in the box that they belong, right? Right? It's then not giving them access to you fully. It's then not being as open with them because you know potentially they're going to use it against you. I have people in my that are in my circle that took me a while, but I've realized who they are and I put them in the box they belong. And so still on my network, I'm not going to discard them. I'm not going to do, what a lot of people started doing in 2020 over politics, right? Cutting off friends and all that. No, we can still be cordial, right? But now I recognize who you are and I'm going to put you in the box that you belong, right? And so just and be your authentic self, right? You hear that a lot. Don't think that because you don't fit the mold of what everybody else in a particular organization, business unit, or company is, that you have to conform. Any organization that wants you to conform and not be you is not the organization you want to be in. You want to go to an organization that has got a supportive and open culture, that is opening and accepting of everybody and is willing to embrace everybody, including their differences.
Well, Larry, thank you so much again for being with us today, and we cannot thank you enough. And hopefully, when our lives get in normal in future someday, maybe you can visit us in campus.
Yes, I would love that.
So thank you again. So this ends our seminar series today. Thank you all for coming.